Welcome to the Mosaic Life podcast.
Life is an art. Every moment a picture painted in time. The color, texture, lighting, all context. The Mosaic Life vision is to cast a warm glow on your masterpiece, highlighting the struggle while showcasing the culmination of years of hard work.
Join us for guided meditations, interviews with authors and leaders, and engaging conversation as we explore the depths of our consciousness. Welcome to the Mosaic.
Yeah.
The Mosaic podcast. It's an interesting thought thinking about anybody who's listening to us for the first time, because we are conversing for the first time, or recording it. We've conversed many times, but we, thought it's the right time to share that. So, Ernie, I appreciate you being here with me.
Yeah, man, this is great. In a beautiful room, perfect vibe. I'm ready.
Good. Well, I'm Trey, and this is the Mosaic podcast.
And I'm Ernie, and I'm nervous. It's interesting to hear myself being recorded, and then to know that people are going to listen to this.
It is an interesting feeling, exciting, nerve-wracking feeling. I'm coming to it from a different perspective, having just recorded the 84th episode of my other podcast, #Questions.
Yeah.
This certainly isn't a promotional platform for that, but we certainly have two different mindsets. But I like that.
Yeah, where do we start, man?
Well, let's just talk about let's talk about what the Mosaic is and where it came from. There's a lot of history to go in there, which we can delve into piece by piece, but let's kind of hit the middle of your and my history, and that's we wanted an outlet to get together and have deep and meaningful conversations, in which we found a space in a yoga studio, which was a whole interesting turn of events. But you were the one who came up with the Mosaic, and I think no better time than now to talk about what that word means to you.
Yeah, it's kind of twofold. It is a collection of images in life, so pieces that come together to create the image of our life. And then also connecting people, because when we join in groups like we did in the yoga studio, interesting things happen. You can create in a way that is different than creating on your own. So it's seeing the bigger picture created by those things, these different elements and different people that come together.
And when you first suggested that name, I fell in love with it because it just seemed so natural a fit. And, I made the joke a while ago that whenever Ernie and I are together, we try to outdo each other and how I'm going to say this wrong, and how good of people we are. That's not the right way of putting it, but
you're putting it perfectly.
How
we
mindful.
show up in our best, we know when we get together that it's game face. What are we bringing to the table? Where are we slacking? How could we be doing it differently? And we show up that way, and we share with each other in that way. And
one of the
it's authentic, even though I see where it can fall off course, we're acting in a way or something, but
no, it is authentic.
Yeah.
And I have to imagine that will be a theme throughout this podcast, is showing up as your best self, because I will be the first to admit I haven't always been the best person in the world. Like anybody else, I still do my questionable share of things, but I aspire, I think, like many, to get to a point where I'm happy with myself, content with myself, and content with the life that surrounds me. And Ernie is that support system among a few of our other mutual friends and colleagues. So, for that, I seriously do thank you, because it may be a joke, but I mean, it is certainly reality.
Yeah, and I've also had my fair share of downsides and not being the best person. And so when we create a structure, when we decide we're going to be a different a manifestation of ourselves. And then we surround ourselves with people who instigate that or provoke that or evoke that in some way. It keeps us tethered to that.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And so through our yoga studio sessions, many ideas blossomed from there. One was a grandiose idea that I would still love to pursue at some point in time, but honing down on that, out came this podcast, which was just an avenue, a platform for us to talk about what has worked in our lives, what led us to this point, and to really see and learn from others who are experts. And I guess the elevator pitch is we want to talk with and help people talk with people who have overcome insurmountable odds to get to where they are and help others do the same. And I don't know if either one of us have had insurmountable odds, but we've certainly had, obstacles to overcome. And it's always great to hear about people living through misery, for lack of a better word.
Struggle, suffering. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then seeing what happens after, what came from it and why it was important.
Certainly. And hold me to this, because I intended to put this in the show notes, but I didn't. And I want to talk about it more later as it naturally comes up. But a few months ago, I sent you a photo. You remember that photo?
The book?
No, a photo of myself. It wasn't a selfie. It was just I found myself.
Yes, I know what
in a very difficult place and
vulnerable,
place. And I let it break me down and get the best of me. And having, I don't want to call it foresight, I don't want to call it mental aptitude, I just want to call it I'm taking this picture of myself because I know at some point in time I'm going to come out the other side and I can look at this picture and I can say I did this and so can you. And this is probably right around the time when we started talking about the podcast. And so at some point in time, as we grow and market ourselves, and I will post that on our website or on Instagram, something for our listeners. Yeah, absolutely.
Stay tuned. It was so. Just to touch on that, I think I've learned recently. This past year, I've been in a men's group and being witnessed by people, and specifically other men in those vulnerable areas, really opens up a different place. So I definitely appreciated that, and I'm excited you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I definitely wanted to. But yes, that is our vision for the Mosaic. Like so many things, it's going to evolve and twist and turn, and maybe 6 months, 12 months from now, it's going to be something completely different.
Not be that at all.
Right. And that's okay.
It's going to be a video game coming in 2020.
I mean, if it affects people's lives for the better, then I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dude, there's no doubt. I already feel that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, Ernie, I know I've known you for, I don't know, a year, 2 years now.
Maybe 2 now.
Yeah. But for the people who are just meeting you, why don't you just tell everybody about you? Tell everybody about who the real Ernie is.
Oh, man, I feel myself getting nervous again. I was sinking in. I'm like, oh, this feels so easy now. And then you ask me about myself. Yeah.
Your dreams, hopes, goals, ambitions.
Well, what really would be most important would be to talk about the struggle that I came through and where it brought me today. Coming into adulthood was like a terrible time for me. High school was really easy. I got a full ride scholarship. It seemed like I was set up.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Full ride for what?
It was a merit-based scholarship.
Awesome.
To Ohio University, go Bobcats, and I ended up dropping out on a full ride. No shit. That was 4 years in the making. Going into college, I was excited. I would figure out what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and I had no idea. I switched majors many, many times, every semester probably, so that I could just feel like I was moving in a direction that was useful or positive or true. Found out I could get into the bars at 20 with a fake ID, started drinking a lot, and partying and didn't have what I want to say, what that part of me wants to say. I didn't have guidance, but the truth is I wasn't open to guidance, and spiraled into a depression, had a lot of dark times, and somewhere down the line, I was 23 or 24, my girlfriend and I found out we were having a baby, and the only thing that, looking back now, the only thing that was clear to me in my life growing up, because of my amazing father, I always knew that when I had a baby, that I would just be the best dad. And something switched in that moment. I had a purpose, or I had a vision that was clear and palpable. And so from that, I've been learning how to be married and create a relationship, continually foster or to foster a relationship, to continue it in a positive direction, to create love as much as possible, as fully as possible. I've been learning patience with my kids, and with the world and with my goals. And I've been seeking to help people do these things, relating and communicating. And yeah, so that's where I am now, constantly looking how to be more clear in my intentions, provide a thriving atmosphere for my family, and to help other people do that.
I like how you described yourself. I mean, how ego was not in any of what you just said, which I truly appreciate. We've talked a lot about ego in the past. It was all about personal growth. But I want to touch on, what you are doing now, because it's very important, and what your pursuit is. I think especially along the men's group, but also what your pursuit in coaching. Talk a little bit about that.
So it's still evolving, and so I have clients, I have a process, I have a structure. But what I've noticed most is my pursuit in coaching people has taught me how to just be a better human, how to communicate better, how to listen. Listening is an art, man. It's a skill. And so I'm thankful that I was drawn to this profession of coaching, and because it's just giving me what is needed to be in service of my community, of my family, of myself. And so when I look out long term, in this vision that I'm creating, I just know what I'm doing now through this is creating a better man and creating better people, or not better, but more clear people around me. And so that's the vision right now, to continue doing that and to magnify that in myself and in other people.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you are trying to create a better world in which you get to live, and then also subsequently your family and children as well.
Nailed it. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's hard to think about that, because the first thought in my mind when upon saying that was, creating a better world for you to live in so you can be happier. It kind of feels selfish at first blush. But, when you think about your ability to affect the happiness and the contentedness of others around you, that in turn does the same for people around them, it really is an outward effect, which I truly appreciate, because it helps, whether or not, it's a selfish or selfless pursuit, it makes me feel like I'm a better person because of the level of standard that you hold yourself to. So that is really, I've said this a million times, hearing you speak and hearing, your thoughtfulness it's very powerful. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I accept that, and that recognition, and then also like throw it back, because what we create when we're together is a place for me to really express that, and so doing something like this, or just having a conversation over coffee, just allows that to create itself, so to speak. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man.
Oh man.
So Ernie and I met. We I don't know what your motivation for this was, but we met as part of a meetup group, a now defunct meetup group. That's really, it was interesting. It was a leadership group. Run by a couple of people who were relatively new to the area and just looking to meet other folks. And we studied, what was that book that we studied?
It's actually sitting right here, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. And I was either a fresh entrepreneur or a budding one. And I just want to get out, meet new people and network. And I didn't know what I would find myself coming into, and it turned out to be a great experience. And at the midpoint of that group, Ernie came in, and we kind of started tossing some ideas around. Ended up doing something called Dub Talks, I think they were, which was kind of like TED Talks, but
on steroids. It was sweet. We got we had the group of people coming together from completely different walks of life.
Yeah.
And then everyone was asked to bring some sort of skill or expertise or insight to the table and present for 20 minutes on it.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
It was a really fun experience. But yeah, so I think the first time Ernie and I sat down together, I don't know how it came about, but we started talking about podcasting, and then Tim Ferriss, and then once you start talking about Tim Ferriss,
it's game over.
It is. It's game over. Yeah.
Did we just become best friends? Right.
And then I think we started talking about Tara Brach and meditation and all that.
That was so I remember sitting at the table, and there were two things specifically that I was like, I want to get to know this dude. And the first was that you said you had meditated for like 90 days straight, or maybe it was even more than that. I think it was more than that. And I was like, oh man, this guy's awesome. I can clearly see that he's doing that just because you were very present, and you could just feel your consciousness in the room when you were in there. And then the other thing was that you barely spoke, but when you did speak, it came from a place of curiosity and insight. And so that was really nice. A gift to the group. And from those two things that day, I was like, that guy is going to be my friend, and we're going to have a podcast together.
Oh, good. I'm glad that you envisioned that.
Yeah, I did this all. So.
Good. Yeah, no, that was the genesis of this relationship. But I don't know. I feel a sense of shame talking about myself sometimes, but I'll do it anyway.
It would be useful.
I spent a lot of time over the past 10 years bouncing around quite a bit. I get bored very easily from career to career, never really landing anywhere for more than a couple years. 5 years ago, people would call that job hopping. Nowadays, it's a little bit more accepted because you're getting the experience that you want and that you need. But like I said, I met Ernie at a time where I think I was just to the point where I was getting ready to go off on my own. And I got to that point because of meditation, reflection, and stoicism, and everything that helped me to become a better person. And we can certainly talk about all those things that led to that sort of happiness a little bit later. But I really feel bad. I feel like I'm not describing myself well.
In what way? Hold on. What do you mean?
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of how
So this is a perfect time for us to like really create this podcast in the way that we want, because before we started recording, one of the things that we, have been talking about for a week or two is like just being totally real.
Yeah.
Not necessarily having to be perfect or
Absolutely
expert. So
Yeah.
I'm open to hearing it.
You're absolutely right. So from age 24, when I graduated college, I started off in radio, worked there for a couple years, went into small business. I was a professional matchmaker.
You worked on the radio?
Yeah.
Doing what?
Both marketing, and I was on air a little bit too.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you have like a handle?
No, I just said Trey.
Oh.
Just went by Trey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And then I was a professional matchmaker, like matchmaker, make me a match.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an episode in itself. Seriously. I'm like, it's funny, but
Yeah.
I think that would be an excellent episode.
Okay. All right. I'm trying to remember. I've had so many jobs, man.
Yeah.
I had some sales roles after that. Worked in the agency space for a little bit. Then most recently, I worked for a dental office doing their marketing. And then luckily, I was very thankful and fortunate that they let me phase myself out before going off on my own. Starting my own company and focusing on marketing, advertising, and design. And if we're talking about happiness, I've never and will never look back. There's so much wrong with corporate America nowadays, and I think back sometimes.
Some of corporate America.
What's that?
Some of corporate America.
Some of corporate
I feel like there is a budding environment.
There is
in a lot of
a new wave of it. Absolutely.
Surely.
Yeah.
But there is definitely that firm structure that's still around in a lot of places.
Yes. I mean, clocking in and, twiddling your thumb for 8 or 9 hours a day, working when you doing the relevant work that you need to stay afloat and, going home at the end of the day miserable. At least I know that's not everybody's experience, but it was my experience in so many positions. And it was such a deadening feeling that I had to get out of it. So
especially when you feel something coming through you.
Yes.
It can feel like it gets in the way. I work a job currently, and in the past 3 years, I've given like 6-week notices to these jobs, saying I just need 6 more weeks. I'll have everything I need, and then I won't have to work these jobs.
Yeah.
I've done that in 2 separate jobs, and I still work now. I've come from this like hopeful place a couple times, and now I'm being more realistic with what I'm doing and finding that happiness doesn't necessarily come through where I'm putting my time, but how I'm putting myself into that time. But the point I was making is it can be easy to get in this like thought loop when you're in a job, when you feel a potential coming through you and you spend 8 hours or 12 hours, 16 hours, some people at this job, knowing that there's something else that you want to do.
Yes.
I imagine that might have been some of the experience. It's been my experience in some jobs.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And, at least for me, it's always been difficult sharing the vision of whether it was a corporate job, my manager and then their manager and then the owners, or, whether it's a small business, just sharing the vision of the owners. I guess thinking back and thinking honestly, when you look at the people who come from the top and trickle everything down, if you don't see that fire burning in their eyes, then you're not going to, it's impossible for you to feel it yourself. And I think that was, a little bit of what I experienced. And
yeah, and feeling it authentically.
Yeah.
Like that's an important part.
Yeah.
Because they can either say it, like if you're talking about the leadership of any project or of a family even, like this is relevant for me as a father. It's one thing to say something and have a idea and try to be rah-rah about it, but then there's another place of conviction that you don't necessarily need to be rah-rah, but it can come through that way, that people can feel, people can grab onto, and it doesn't always happen with leadership in companies.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
And it's it's not like it's easy to say it's the boss's fault or something like that, or the leader's fault. And yes, there is responsibility there, but if they knew better, they would do better, right? But we fall into that as we come into the world and start having these jobs and don't get to experience that type of leadership.
Yes, completely. All of that. But yeah, so that led me down the path into entrepreneurship, which has had its ups and downs, but I'm certainly on an upswing now, which is fantastic. And then, as mentioned at the top of this, I also host another podcast, which has been a dream come true, and I'm excited to, spread my wings in a different direction. But what the point that I want to make is I'm finding myself needing to be much more intent with my listening here than I am in the other podcast where it's a bunch of, one-line jokes and,
Sure.
Witty banter, whereas here's a lot deeper. So
Good luck.
Yeah. So
I'm going to do my best to derail this whole conversation every time.
In the future, I may need to consider not recording them on the same night because I think that's going to be.
No, dude. Yeah. We're in it. We're just looking at different ways that we've come through life, come through jobs, and have lost hope or lost faith or lost touch with our purpose or what we want to do and our willingness to do it. And you were explaining in your life how you came through that, doing the matchmaking, the radio, working for different companies, and you were probably going somewhere, but I decided to samurai that shit.
No, that was fine. It stopped me from being long-winded, so I appreciate that. And I guess semi-relevant to that point, I do want to share this quote that I wrote down. It was in a book that I read recently called, what's it called? Let me reach the Hacking of the American Mind. A great book. I'll chat more about it. But the search for happiness is one of the chief sources of unhappiness. And
Say it again.
Eric Hoffer said this. It's the search for happiness is one of the chief sources of unhappiness.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think, depending on how you shape that in your mind, it's. I
can't. That's why I said wow. Literally, it just blew my mind apart. Trying to figure out. It opened a different way of seeing it for me. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I felt for so long that if I just got to this point in a career, if I got to this point in relationships, if I got to this point in, how I'm living, then I will be happy. And I was always chasing a foothold that was 10, 20 feet above me. Whereas, I wasn't looking at what it is I have or what I need to do today to get to that point. And over the past year or so is when I've really been able to grasp that, which is why, this quote does resonate with me. And now I'm remembering more of my dub talk from the leadership group. And one of the main elements of it was I woke up at some point in time in 2018 and realized that all of these things that I've ever dreamt of, all these things that I ever wanted, were never just going to magically happen overnight. And some weird part of me, some strange abstract part in my mind always believed that they would. I would just wake up one day and be an author, or be a millionaire entrepreneur. And it was an eye-opening experience. And so, that chase for the happiness, it comes through, self-awareness and reflection. Not something that's off in the distant future that is intangible. At least that's how I interpret that.
Yeah, and it just seems like what I'm thinking of as you say that is what we're exposed to, or the ideas that we're exposed to, or I'll say the ideas that I've been exposed to just growing up. If gratitude wasn't necessarily cultivated in your culture or your family or your community, then why would you know gratitude? But on the other hand, if poverty or lack or was magnified, or the idea of how it affects your life was exploited in some way, then you attach to that. And we grow up watching people seemingly coming from nowhere to uber successful. And now, especially now, it's like every morning we wake up and see other people being uber successful.
And that's the culture that has been bred over the past 10 or 15 years is, these people are from rags to riches overnight, but that's not the case at all. That's just the way that social media frames it, or the news media frames it, because our attention spans are so short. It's impossible to give, the backstory on, the years and years and years of hard work that people put into it.
Well, and also that they're probably not happy, all of them.
Oh yeah.
That's like, we get to see the perfect frame of it. I fall into this myself sometimes, where my stories or something on social media are most generally just the best frame of it. Like for my daughter's preschool first day, getting her to eat breakfast and get dressed was terrible. But what I posted on Facebook was the picture we took right before we went to school. Like,
right.
It's just like the culture around it. It's focused on being perfect or the image being just right.
It is, which is, it's, in the frame of your mind, you are preserving that memory, but in the frame, of the, I guess, overall network, it can feel, not necessarily with your daughter or with any, it can feel dishonest or can feel disingenuous when, hashtag blessed, taking pictures of feet at the beach when your heart is broken or your mind is, frazzled, but you want people to perceive you as this genuine, happy, not a care in the world person, which, just breeds more self-hatred and lack of understanding in other people. So it's a vicious circle, which I have my own problems with. But I mean, there are. I see what you're saying. I feel like I kind of derailed you now.
No. Actually, I was looking at a way to get back to the idea that we're going to wake up and be successful or happy one day. Like there's this element of it's out there somewhere and it's going to happen somehow.
Right.
and so we're here to look at ways that are practical.
Absolutely. And that is kind of the premise of, where we are today. We as we were talking about the Mosaic and, how we want to, it almost seemed like a Herculean task to, approach this podcast from an intellectual standpoint and, really figure out the, value we want to provide. And so we somehow got on the topic of happiness and, what that meant to us each individually. And so that is part of what we want to do with the show is provide that value to help you find your own happiness. And, we've also talked about wellness and health as well. And we want to do so in a number of different ways, but what in your mind what value do you envision providing through the Mosaic either for yourself or for your family or for just anybody who listens?
Well, usually when I state something as a fact, like I decide this is how happiness comes, usually over time that shifts entirely or evolves in some way. So I think the value is taking what I've learned thus far, sharing it, hoping that some of it might hit somebody's ears and be useful for this period of their life or for their life in its entirety. And then as I evolve, to be able to share how it changes or how it becomes more clear. And to find and to facilitate that with the conversation we have. So seeing where we align and then where we like completely go different ways in how we do things and why this brings happiness for me and why that brings happiness for you, and how, just like looking at all the elements of everything that we do, all the relationships we have, what we're creating, and how they're evolving for us individually and
Absolutely.
then together as well, or aligned.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and that kind of gave me a thought that while we kind of gave this overarching theme to this particular episode as happiness, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be episodic. It will be more serialized in the sense that happiness will continue to be a theme from now and into the future. Whether or not we focus on other areas of that, that's yet to be determined. But I definitely appreciate what you just said. But when we kind of broke down, how we envision this going, there were a few different, I guess, types of episodes or areas that we want to focus on.
Sure, go there.
First of which is
I went straight like philosophy.
No,
like,
that was perfect.
That's where my head's going this whole time. Like, I'm supposed to share really important thoughts and make it change the world. So let's do the structure too.
If we can change the world with this, that'd be fantastic. But yeah, we essentially thought of 3 different avenues to approach, and those may grow or they may shrink. We'll kind of see. But first of which is, this what we're having right now, just a conversation, because so many of our conversations we feel, you may not feel the same way, but we feel are thoughtful and reflecting,
we'll know soon enough.
can benefit the world over.
They definitely benefit each other. Like, I know some of the things that you say, some of the questions you ask benefit me, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
So it's clear that this stuff, what we discuss and how we focus on our life, could be helpful. And then we also have other elements that we want to bring into it. For instance, meditations.
Yes.
That was one thing that we bonded over immediately, was Tara Brock and her podcast. And she has long form speeches, and then she also has meditations. And so we want to add that aspect too.
We do. And it's something that has not been mentioned yet. You are an aspiring, I'm just going to say you are a meditation instructor.
That was terrible. Maybe we can edit in like angels singing. That would be better.
Or I'll just leave it in like this. So
okay.
It's super awkward. No, but part of this, so we said, hey, man, or I said, I would love for you to. I would love you too. I would love you if you would create some guided meditations for this, because I do listen to Tara Brock almost exclusively, which is great, but I just I haven't done enough research to find other ones that I really like, and to have something that you and I can both relate to and hone in on would be fantastic. And so that I have heard one that Ernie has done, and it's phenomenal. I'm looking forward to releasing that to you folks who happen to be listening. So
yeah.
And why don't you, because you and I haven't talked extensively about that part of the podcast, what ideas, what visions, how do you see yourself approaching that to make sure that, from one meditation to the next, stays, I don't know if fresh is the right word in meditative world, but how do you see that becoming part of your life and becoming part of the podcast?
So it definitely is. That's like a question that I still have. And I've just experienced different teachers and I don't know how I'm going to do that. The last couple that I've recorded, I've just come in clear and then guided myself through meditation. So, like if I were to guide a meditation now, I would focus on deepening my breathing, because I notice it's really in my chest and that I have a tightness here in my chest from maybe being nervous. So if I would to guide a meditation now, I would just follow that. And as I walk myself into peacefulness, maybe that meditation at some point could do that for somebody else. Maybe that's the wrong way to do it, but that's how I've been doing it.
It works. So no, like so much of this, it's going to evolve and grow, and I'm really thrilled to see where that does go. From a standpoint that, I'm excited to utilize meditations that are produced by us or by Ernie for my own self-betterment, but also for the fact that, meditation is very big and very popular and very powerful. So hopefully that, in all honesty, helps us expand out to the masses too. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it's fun to do, and I hope that you dive into it too. I remember you leading a meditation at the yoga studio. Do you remember?
I do not remember that. I don't remember that.
Well, maybe I was dreaming.
I was about to lie and said, yeah, I remember that. No, I want to sound like a fool.
But I just your capability to be present and
I may delve.
Yeah.
I may delve.
Anyways.
Yeah. And then the third element that I'm really excited about exploring, because it makes me feel like I'm a Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan, is an interview portion of the podcast. So in essence, if you want to really break it down, there are going to be 3 types of podcast episode: meditation, conversation, and interview with there's no clear constraints on that as of this point in time. Ernie and I have talked about, authors or thought leaders or entrepreneurs. The only really stipulation that we put on it is we want to talk with people who have overcome adversity, overcome some insurmountable feat or roadblock in their life to reach the other side. Because so many times when we hit a wall, we just turn around and look for a different way or an alternative route, or just go back home in the first place. And so we want to talk with people who got over those humps and how they did it.
Yeah. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. So I'm
totally.
excited.
I mean, I think that's an element that will be really powerful for people. Like I said earlier, what drew me to you specifically was the questions that you ask. So I want to be a part of that and grow in my ability to interview as you kind of lead that part of it for me.
And yeah. I am excited. I know we should probably right now just declare a drinking game for every time Tim Ferriss is mentioned or another name.
Well, for us?
No, or for us or for our listeners or any of the above. But I remember Tim saying that, he started his podcast, the Tim Ferriss Experiment or Experience. I don't remember which.
Experiment, right? Yeah.
I think something like that. Yeah. But regardless, he started because he wanted to become a better interviewer. And so I am kind of following in those same footsteps because I would love to become a good interviewer. And, just really get into the minds of smart people so I can piggyback off them and see what I can learn. So I am thrilled about that. And that being said, this is an open invitation for anybody who feels like they have had that sort of experience and would like to talk with us at some point in time, either on air or just offline.
Send in your application.
That said, we will
review them and maybe
we will. We do have an email address. It's one Mosaic Life. That is one spelled out, MOSAIC life @gmail.com. Same name on Instagram, and we will have a website at some point prior to launch. So
sweet.
Yeah. Well, before we try to wrap things up for the first time, I do want to talk a little bit about, what we are doing currently to find that contentedness in our life, to, allow ourselves to sit back for a moment and reflect and say, I right now am actually happy. What is it from habits to things you have subtracted or things you've added into your life recently that allows you to say that you are a happy person?
So I want to jump in.
Yes.
Because by the way you said before we bring it to a close, I don't want anybody to expect it to come to a close because it might go for another hour. I have no idea where we're going with this. So buckle up. But yes, let's do it.
Yeah, keep going, man. You jumped in.
Oh, no, you're going to start. No, and what I would like to hear, because you brought up elements of your life early on where being in the corporate world wasn't suiting you and your ambition. And you've come a ways from that. Even in the 2 years that I've known you, a lot of different things have happened. So I'm wondering how these elements have changed for you, what you were searching for, right? Like, I'm going to wake up one day and be happy suddenly, to where you are now and how it's manifesting itself for you.
Sure. So there was a point, and I remember this point. It was right around Christmas time, I think 2017, where I had finally had enough of Facebook. That was the first step in the right direction. I remember deleting the app off my phone. I remember very specifically, and I really do think that was a huge turning point for me. And I don't want to get long-winded about any of this, but it would be useful. It was from that point in time where I started to look for ways where I could optimize myself and, find ways that I can eliminate negativity, eliminate unhappiness, and add value to myself. So
the first thing was Facebook.
The first thing was Facebook because it was toxic. It is toxic. I'm sure I'll harp on that many, many times in the future, but I will try to remain as level-headed about it as I possibly can.
Yeah, because there are elements of it that are masterful, like in creating a business and keeping relationships. But then its algorithm, right, is really built to suck you in and keep you there.
Well, that's because there was actual research done by Facebook as they realized that there's more engagement in negative posts than there is positive posts. And so that's why the algorithm puts more negativity in your newsfeed than positivity. There
was research on that and showed more negativity in what it's giving you than wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems evident, but to see that it actually showed up in the numbers too.
Yeah. But regardless, pointless. But the point being is that, I cut that out of my life, and then I started thinking about other ways how I can build upon that. And I'm just kind of putting pieces together in my mind. I remember at the time at my last full-time job, I had about a 25 minute commute to and from work. And I was listening to radio because I didn't know any better. I was listening to a few talking heads making stupid jokes. If you're in Columbus, Ohio, you can probably guess which show I was listening to. But point being, that was a waste of close to an hour of my life every single day. And I think that's around the time when I discovered Tim Ferriss, actually. I started listening to his podcast, started listening to many, many others, and I realized the world of knowledge that I was missing out on. So that really became a huge thing for me. From there, discovered Stoicism. I was familiar with the word, but like many people, you just think it's somebody who's emotionless and somebody who is incapable of feeling. But what I came to learn is that
So maybe just a crash course on it too, because some people might not even know what you're talking about.
I'm going to try and give a crash course. Yeah. I'm never good at describing
just
what
like
it is.
the basic of what is what is Stoicism? Is it a scientific method? What does it look like?
As far as I understand it is an ancient philosophy, Greek or Roman or something of that sort.
As far as you understand it, is more than enough. I guess I just for me growing up, until I didn't hear the word until I was like 23 or 24, and even then, for a while, I didn't know what it meant. It wasn't until Ryan Holiday came into my sphere that I started to understand a little bit of what it was. So even that much is a good amount for somebody who hasn't heard the word ever.
And the best way that I can describe it is it's a bastardization of a quote by one of the famous ancient Stoics. Basically, he said, love every situation that you're given, positive or negative. They don't have the power to affect you unless you give it emotional power. And that is a stretch when it comes to the actual quote, but that is in essence what it means. You only let circumstance dictate how you feel. if you give an emotional response.
Yeah, there's a level of choice to the
Yeah.
way you feel about the things that happen.
Absolutely.
And you have the choice to be stoic.
Yeah. And that's not to say that Stoics don't have feelings or emotions. They just don't let them dictate, their livelihood.
Yeah, yeah. Long pause here because I'm trying to remember a quote. When you allow, this is from a guy that I'm working with, not more than a guy, he's a teacher, John Wineland. If you are looking to deepen your relationships or your connection to your own consciousness, that's the place to go. I'm in a men's group, and I posted in this men's group, and one of the things that came about it was John sharing this. He probably didn't intend for this to be a quote that I state in a podcast, but it hit home with me and a bunch of the guys. When we let our emotions dictate our integrity, everyone loses.
Agreed. I agree.
Yeah.
It honestly, the biggest effect it had on me started like so many things, on my drives. I used to get irrationally upset when somebody would cut me off or somebody would do something stupid on the road, which happens every single day. And what choice did I have at that point in time? I could punch my steering wheel, which I did many times. I could flick them off, which I did a handful of times. I could honk. I could tailgate them. But in the end, what does that really get me? It will get me raised blood pressure. It could get me into a fight that I am more than likely to lose. It could get me arrested. There is no positive outcome to that. And so rather than let that affect the next hour or 8, the point is I could choose how to react. And if I chose to have no reaction, then I would go about my way. And that was the turning point for me. Because if I could control and I'm not an angry person by nature, but if I can control my anger there on the road, then I can control my reaction to other situations in life.
Totally. Dude, I feel ridiculous like preaching this to people, but I barely do because of how ridiculous I feel, but driving is such a perfect place to gather awareness of your emotional volatility.
Yes, it is.
Of your presence. And so I'm wondering now about when you hit this point in your life, you discovered Stoicism and you realized you had the choice to react or not react. How did that process go? Because emotions will come, you don't react. Was there an element after that of processing or gathering awareness? What did it look like for you?
I made a decision. I mean, it's not like I had to decide to fulfill a void with either hatred and anger or, happiness and elation. There is a middle ground. There's that choice. I could either choose to be angry or I could choose to not let it affect me. There was no, and once I chose to not let it affect me, it was gone. Mm-hmm. It was gone. The person in front of me moved on. I cared about my way. I got to work. It was gone. There was no void that needed to be filled. There was no black hole where, rage and anger needed to be. It was it was gone.
It was just gone.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I think there's an important element there of it can be that easy as making a decision and opening your possibilities to just being. Yeah. Just being. Whatever comes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so around that time, and I will say these things, some of them I still do, some of them I still don't, or I don't anymore rather. I started journaling at the time. I was using the bullet journal methodology, which was great for a long, long time. It was created by Carol Ryder, and I'm going to promote his book that came out I think last year. I think it's actually called the Bullet Journal Method, and I'm actually quoted in that book, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Congratulations. That was really cool.
So if you get a chance to check it out, Carol Ryder, I believe is his name.
Carol?
It's Carroll.
Okay.
Ryder, Ryder. I'm just pulling this out of my ass. I think like page 167. I could be completely out of it. If that's the right number, then
He's
that's
not
awesome.
actually
But
in there.
yeah,
No.
but yeah, I was.
So you were you did away with Facebook.
I
you
did.
discovered Stoicism.
Mm-hmm.
You started journaling.
Yes.
And what else?
Meditation. Yeah, I had toyed with meditation in the past, but just because it was a word that I knew, and I was like, I'll try it. But it's like, smoking pot for the first time. You're not going to get much out of it, but you want to try it because all the cool kids are doing it. But once I really discovered that there was a purpose built into it, that's when I really got into it. Again, I want to say about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm listing all these things off with the caveat that about 6 months ago, kind of thing, or I guess 6 to 9 months ago, things kind of fell by the wayside, and I had to rebuild myself back up, which I will get into at some point. But these are the things that led to the massive change in my life. So meditation was certainly one of those, journaling, and just taking ownership of, my life and happiness. And a lot of that is also, thinking about the things in life that you don't want to do, because so much unhappiness in our life is us doing the things that we don't want to do.
No shit.
And just, are they really that necessary?
Yeah. I think when you talk about journaling and meditation, the Facebook too, and I haven't necessarily delved into the Stoicism philosophy, so I can't say whether or not that would be the case. But certainly with the meditation and the journaling, it creates an awareness within me, and you can speak to whether or not it does for you, of the things that we actually care about, the things that we actually want to be doing, the things that are affecting us. They start to pop up in what we're writing, or they start to show their face over and over again in meditation. Quite literally, people, right, or experiences show their face that we continually subject ourselves to, and don't even know that that's an aspect of unhappiness, of continuing our own unhappiness by choosing these things. I'm unconsciously choosing to be unhappy. So writing these things out, it doesn't have to necessarily be anything articulate. It's just like writing out where your brain is.
Absolutely.
What is in my mind right now, and how am I saying it in my mind? And then spending time with those things in meditation, sitting still and feeling as these things pop up, how they affect you. That is those two things, man. Like if you're not doing it, if you've never tried those things, I would invite you to try them just for 4 days. For 4 days, actually, maybe even 3 if you have trouble with commitment or something, or if you're really struggling, just give it 3 days. Write every day, meditate for 10 minutes, maybe once or twice a day, and then you'll see it, and then from that you'll continue to want to do it. Those two things were spot on for me too.
Good. Yeah, I completely agree. And so I guess that's a great transition to the things that you are doing or have done, or that got you, I guess, to be somewhat, I don't know, granular, or whatever the right word is, to what got you to the point.
The right word will be in the show notes.
It will. To sit down at that table at the Bogey Inn in Dublin, Ohio, the night in which we met. So it's a romanticized way of saying, what got you to the point where you became self-aware and ambitious enough to want to grow your network, both professionally and personally, and emotionally and spiritually, all of that.
That's a hard question at first, because it brings up two separate things. Because I showed up to that particular thing because I have a business, and I was treating my coaching business in a certain way that and I say it like this because it's evolved over time, but I showed up to network for my business. I might be able to be more clear on that at some other point. But what got me to actually caring about the elements that provide awareness for me. So I started meditating before my daughter was born. So that brings up the question of why I even started in the first place. It must have been the same thing. I can't imagine it was much different. So there was that, like building the awareness. I don't know. I'm kind of lost at that question.
That's okay. So
yeah.
what do you? Then let's talk a little bit about right now. What is it? And you know what?
Let's just cut that. Yeah,
we can do that. But I do want to. It brings up an interesting point. A mutual friend, her name's Jennifer. She and I are in the habit of, on occasion, texting, calling in person, just asking, "Are you happy?" And that's a very loaded question. It is, because happiness is a loaded subject. And so, at the points, I will say I catch myself being happy more and more, which makes me feel like I'm on the right path. And I hope that you can say the same thing, but I'm going to make it a habit to ask you at some point in every one of these conversational episodes, are you happy?
Are you happy?
And why?
And why? Yeah. Cool. And the first thing that comes up, funny enough, because I said I haven't delved into Stoicism too much, is yes, I'm happy because, like you said, I'm experiencing more and more happiness. Like the ratio of struggle to happiness has changed significantly, where I might have spent months in unhappiness, like depression or whatever, just sadness, before something from the world comes in and makes me happy. Now it's much a thinner period of time. My awareness has expanded, and I'm happy because in those struggling periods, I've learned how not to react. So interestingly enough, maybe I'm practicing Stoicism. It clearly, as the terms that you've brought up and described it. So enjoying the happiness as it comes, and then in the periods that we might say are unhappiness, or I'm impatient, or I'm angry, allowing myself not to have to act in that, in whatever way feels propelled forward. I can simply be still with it and learn from it, and it'll pass. I can share it. I can sculpt more of the happiness from my understanding of what's going on there. And that's been this year. I specifically am like focused in to the answer of this question on that period of time, like that unhappiness period, because I'm learning so much that happiness is built there too.
Go into that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if I get angry and I yell at my wife or something, which I don't do anymore, but I have in the past when I didn't know what was going on or when I blamed other people, I'm probably extending my unhappiness by acting in that. On the other hand, if I take that time, I notice I'm getting angry. I don't have to control this moment in my life right now from this place. I can step away. I can sit down. I can come to a place of semi-equanimity at the most, hopefully, balance, and then come from that place and be more accurate in the things that I speak to my wife or to my coworkers or to my peers, whatever it might be. So bringing an awareness to those periods has been profound for me, and that's where my work has been this year.
Good.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense.
What sticks out to you the most?
It was interesting when I asked you to expand upon that, because there's certain insight to be gleaned from building happiness out of unhappiness, and that in itself seems abstract, but it goes back to that quote. The search for happiness is one of the chief sources of unhappiness. For whatever reason in my mind, I pictured a building that has crumbled down to the ground, but from it, through cooperation or through sheer force of will, something new will be born, which is, at least at the very most basic level, you are recognizing that something is wrong and something needs to be done. If you are consciously unhappy, you are giving yourself the opportunity to remove yourself from the situation. It may not be, it's certainly not going to be instant, and it may not be, within a matter of hours or a matter of days or a matter of weeks, but you are cognizant of the fact that there's something wrong that needs to be changed. And so I think that's what I took out of, you saying that.
The term conscious unhappiness, that, like, for me, I was like, oh, that nails it. That nails it. Yeah, because, and maybe I'm moving away, but this feels like a good stem. It's easy to be unhappy and then allow that unhappiness to exert itself in some way, without noticing what's true, yelling, whatever. I mean, anger's my emotion. Like, in my life, it's been my emotion since childhood. So that's probably going to come up as an example for me. You can exert it in some way and not know where it came from, and then continue to do that over and over again, being unconscious of it. Or you might even be unconscious in the way that you go to the fridge and start, grab ice cream from the freezer and just stuff your face and watch TV for 3 hours.
Or the unconscious way in which people look down at their phones.
Yeah, right.
Hours at a time.
Yes. And to be unhappy is like such a bad thing for people. Clearly, because the thoughts that you have in conjunction with the feelings in your body can be excruciating.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily have to be. So to be unhappy and to be conscious of it, and to create a process for yourself, journaling, meditation, a punching bag, like weightlifting, to process those things, for me, allows me to love that. I don't always love being in it. I'm not going to say like I just love to be unhappy. But it gives me enough wherewithal to be in it and not jump away from it a lot of times. Not all the time. Yeah. I don't know.
No, that was great.
When do we start the drinking game? Tim Ferriss.
Next time for sure. I certainly appreciate that. And something I do want to delve into, not this time, but sometime in the future, as we continue to talk about happiness, is there is such an extreme difference that I recently learned about between pleasure and happiness. You talk about going to the fridge, getting ice cream. You talk about looking down at your phone for quick hits of pleasure. That is controlled by dopamine, whereas contentedness and happiness, that's serotonin, and there's such a big difference. Well, the problem is, as you with each dopamine hit, those receptors get downregulated, so you need more of that same activity or sugar rush or anything to get that same amount of pleasure. That's why people overdose, because their dopamine receptors get so regulated that they need more and more to get that same level of high. So that's why it's so dangerous. But
and that's from the Hacking of the American Mind?
Yes. Yeah. I would highly recommend that book.
Yeah, and another one in conjunction to that, not to detour too much,
not at all.
Becoming Supernatural, or Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. He's a neuroscientist, and he talks a lot about meditation and also the chemical processes of your emotions in your body, and really hits it home with that. So if those things intrigue you or other people, those are great places for that too.
And that's fantastic that's a fantastic point to make, that I would love, with your permission, to have a reading list every time or a recommended reading list every time we have one of these episodes, just talk about what we've been reading and how it affects the conversation that we're having. So in the show notes, certainly, those will definitely be in there, and anything related to or a correlation of the things that we've talked about, we would love those recommendations as well.
Yeah, and so you get these hits, right? And then eventually your body's so used to that amount that you're giving yourself that you need more to keep that dopamine going.
Yeah. Yep. And I do want to, I'm still, so I've read the book once. I'm going back through it, highlighting the notes that I've taken. So I want to make sure that I've got a strong basis or a strong foundation in which I can, have an intelligent conversation over. But
it feels intelligent.
Well, good. As long as I sound smart, I guess that's the perception that matters.
It felt like you were going somewhere with it. And again, I felt like I samurai'd that shit.
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, not at all. That's just something that I want to keep, in my mind personally as I move forward with my own pursuits. But it's something that, other people should as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, man, what do you think?
I mean, I'm good with how this went.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah, I love it. It's
good.
Great.
So yeah, in regard to frequency, we don't have any, but in regard to, content, we know that we want to provide value. And so we will do so as often as we can, as many conversations, interviews, meditations as we can. But in the meantime, we will certainly share content. Ernie, you and I had a conversation a couple of days ago about, how we want to envision and focus our Instagram. That will provide a great platform for us to just talk and provide sound bites and, provide meditations and brief moments of focus and contentedness and share our I feel disingenuous saying this, but I guess share our wisdom with the folks.
Insights is a good word if you don't like wisdom.
Yeah. I don't feel like I always know that somebody's going to be wiser than me. And so I don't want to claim I'm wise. If somebody wants to see me that way,
sure.
Fine.
Like some people are going to listen to this and they're going to be like, they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. But other people might listen to this and it might change their entire life. Like this one podcast, just something, one sentence might drive them through the next week, through some fear. So there's definitely wisdom in here.
Yeah. And I know that I'm smart enough to know that I will never know everything. So that's why I want to open myself up to as much reading, as much insight, and as much feedback as I can get.
Yeah, so we don't know the frequency yet. We have a structure.
Yes.
And to tie it into the theme of happiness, we've simply created a structure within which we will be free to play with how we do this.
Absolutely.
And then we will create some more foundational elements of how it's going to run over time and keep people posted. But the point being is having some type of structure like we've created for this podcast, having that in your life as well, is going to allow you to play within the realm of that box that you create for yourself, just to see what happens. So that's what we've done with the podcast. We have no idea where exactly it's going, but we do.
Yeah. Completely. And then of course, the always fun, do us a favor, follow us on Instagram. It's One Mosaic Life. You can email us onemosaiclife@gmail.com. And do us a favor, if you're listening to us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, just leave us a 5-star review. That helps others find us as well. And we always appreciate your comments too.
Yeah, and if you don't want to leave a 5-star, just send us an email instead telling us what we could have done better.
Or leave us a review on Yelp.
Yeah, or Yelp, yeah. Actually, yeah. Did you mention the email?
Yep, okay. onemosaiclife@gmail.com. One is spelled out.
Yeah, because one, questions for topics would be great. 2, if you want to be on the podcast or be a part of it, that would be great. And 3, ways that we can make this more powerful for people, ways that we can improve. All of those seem like great reasons to reach out, and I would appreciate anyone doing that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot, Ernie. Do you want to wrap this up with a
freestyle?
Freestyle, brief moment of reflection, meditation, however you want. Let's. I'm putting you on the spot. Take us out in your podcast debut.
Oh man, what if I have nothing? No, man, I don't know. Like I'm very grateful that we even sat down to do this, and I want to do it again. Like after we end the recording, do another episode. So maybe we'll work on that. Is that cool?
Yeah, that
cool.
sounds good, man. All right, we will see everybody soon. Thank you for listening.
Yes.